Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. You might notice that the quality is slightly different today. I'm actually recording on Zoom, which I don't normally do using my own computer's webcam or anything like that. Obviously, normally I record on my phone. But the reason why I'm recording on Zoom is because we've got a very special guest coming on to the video today. You know her from previous conversations that I've had with her regarding persuasion and other period dramas. It is, of course, Dr. Kayla Jones, who has, since we spoke on persuasion, gained her PhD and is now officially a doctor. So please do congratulate her in the comments for having graduated from her PhD. So she's coming on to the conversation very shortly. I just wanted to do a little intro first to just kind of say a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So we wanted to do a little bit of a period drama discussion. So it's going to come in a few different formats. We're going to look at period dramas that we've both watched over 2023 and what we think of them. We're then going to have a look at why the same period dramas keep being made, because this is something that we kind of have chatted about personally between the two of us anyway. And we've seen it with things like The Persuasion being remade, and we've got more adaptations of Jane Eyre coming and that kind of thing. It's always, say, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and never Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, which is an adaptation that you'll know if you watch one of my recent videos I really want to have. So yeah, we're going to have a conversation about that as well. Then we're going to have a look at why some of the kind of more modern or unusual takes on period dramas seem to be getting so popular. We're going to look at things like Bridgerton and see why that has been so popular. Saltburn, even though technically not a period drama, but we're going to have a look at it anyway. It's very much within that kind of genre, really, even though it's set kind of in a more modern historical time period. And then we're going to have a very brief chat about 2024 and what period dramas are coming up this year and what we're excited to see. So that's a little rundown of what we're going to have a chat about today. So I'm going to welcome Kayla on now to the podcast and we'll get started. Here she is, Dr. Kayla Jones. So when we were doing the last video for Persuasion, you were in the midst of finalising your PhD. So for the sake of continuity, in part of this series, do you want to just let everybody know what you've been doing since then and what you're up to now?
Yes, so I finally graduated from my PhD last summer, which was very exciting. I got my PhD in Welsh history, and now I'm doing a postdoc looking at digital storytelling, which has been really nice. Personally, I started a YouTube channel last year, which has been a big learning curve, but it's been really fun. I have been doing commentary videos on uh, Queen Charlotte and Sanditon. The latest one I did, my husband and I did a few recipes on the Gilded Age, a recipe book that came out in like the 1890s. We replicated some of the foods and stuff. It was really fun but challenging. So yeah, I have just been kind of learning about doing TikTok and YouTube, and then continuing on the podcast here and there. So we're at Regency Rumours on all those platforms.
I'll leave everything in the description box of this video as well. So please do, if you're not already, I know quite a lot of my followers have gone along and followed you, but if you're not, go along and follow Kayla and subscribe to her. And I actually loved that recipe making video. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. And quite interesting. A lot of the stuff looked like that. Was it the soup that you made? Looked a bit like quite bland, if I can
It
say
does,
that.
yeah.
Like
No, and I think that was part of the experiment because we we were like, okay, we're going to go exactly by the book. We're not going to kind of put any of our own spin on it, because this author, she was a food commentator in the 1890s, and she had gone around Europe and gathered all these different recipes from the UK, Germany, Spain, and France, I think. And so we just wanted to follow exactly what she'd put, because she had shadowed some chefs all over the world. And so she took these recipes from them. And so we decided we're just going to go along with what she did. And the results on that one were not so great, but it was a good learning curve. It showed us that it was a hearty meal, and we would have been able to kind of eat it all and be full for the night. But it wasn't necessarily very tasty. So I, if I
exciting.
were to repeat it, I would have put some extra things in there for sure. So
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Like eating recipes from a previous period, it's probably like one of the only forms of like time travel that we truly
yes,
have. Because, you know, yes, you can read books that were written at a certain time and you can watch footage from a certain time, but in terms of actually experiencing with one of your senses what a person in the 17th or 18th century would have tasted, there's no other. I suppose maybe fabric, dressing in costumes. You get a
yeah,
sense of that against your body and how it makes you stand and like kind of what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like comport yourself. I don't know if that's the right
yeah.
word,
Present
but
yourself out to
like
the world.
yeah.
Yeah,
But food is such an emotional thing for so many people, isn't it? And then for you to be able to go back and feel like what it would have been like for kind of a general person eating something like that in that time. That's what I think I really liked about that. So hope you can do some more. So we've got kind of four things, as I mentioned in my introduction, we've got four things we're going to look at. But I think we'll start with looking backwards over 2023 and kind of talking about our own personal highs and lows. So I'll start with my own personal highs in terms of period dramas. And there were two things that I saw that this year that really kind of blew my socks off. The first one was the Bridgerton adaptation, the Queen Charlotte spin-off, not adaptation. I really loved that. I specifically liked the inclusion of the older ladies' stories
mm,
in it. Was that one of your highs as well, do you think? Queen Charlotte.
absolutely. I think Queen Charlotte was a really cool way for Bridgerton to expand the universe, and I think hopefully we'll get other offshoots like that. After this, there'll be other characters that they'll give their own kind of short story to. And I think Queen Charlotte was a great one. I think I have never seen a period drama like this where we can have a male character who, you know, is both seen as handsome and attractive and strong and all those different things and be dealing with mental health issues. And so you're able to love someone and be attracted to someone and them also go through struggles as well as yourself. So I think it was really neat being able to see that because a lot of rom-coms that we watch or period dramas, we do see of this kind of almost perfect Mr. Darcy.
Mm,
And so I think it was really emotional and interesting to be able to see a character like King George portrayed in this way, where she was able to love him and support him and be there for him. But he's flawed, like all of us are, and he doesn't have to
yeah.
be Mr. Macho Perfect Man. So I
Yeah.
loved that about Queen Charlotte.
Yeah, I also love the fact that the whole Bridgerton kind of series and Queen Charlotte especially kind of look at what happens after marriage. Because, like, say, so many period dramas and those kind of Regency novels and things, there's all the kind of trouble and strife happening before the marriage. And then those novels, like all of Austen's novels, finish with the marriage. And it's
Hmm.
like, oh, and then they got married and lived happily ever after. And actually being able to see the breadth of experience in a narrative like Queen Charlotte and Bridgerton. You know, I loved the fact that series one, Daphne and the Duke's marriage happened like mid-season.
Mid-season,
Because
I know. I
yeah,
was surprised by that, but I was like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, but it gave us the opportunity to kind of see what was happening in the background. So yeah, I really liked that, and I always love period dramas that do bring in discussions around mental health because it's something that I am really kind of quite passionate about. There's one of the women in my book, in my second book, Elizabeth Isham. She was living in the mid 1600s and she had huge struggles with mental health. So this mental health issues are not a modern phenomena.
Mm-mm.
They have been happening for since people have been on the planet probably, but I know our understanding has changed. So it's nice to be able to look to produce period dramas now that bring those kind of narratives more to light and that discuss it a little bit more. So
And you
yeah,
can still have
that's
romance and all the rest of it alongside it, which I
yeah,
think is really, really cool. I think a lot of times when we think of putting um, mental health issues in period dramas, they need to either be dark or those artsy, type films, or there's strife in the marriage where the couple doesn't love each other because it was arranged marriage or whatever. And so, um, I love the fact that Queen Charlotte could be a romance, a fun romance, and still have that element in it. And I think that is the
Yeah.
future of period dramas, honestly. So,
Yeah, the other thing that I loved about Queen Charlotte was the discussion of more, I was going to say elderly women. There are no elderly women, just older women's experiences. So, no, you're talking your kind of 40s, 50s, 60s, even age kind of experience, age bubble, I suppose, with what's her name?
oh, Violet.
Violet, yes,
Yes.
with Violet's experience of her garden reblooming. I just thought that was so beautiful. It is so nice to be able to have those kind of discussions because I think, again, people assume that women's experiences historically were that they didn't have conversations about sex or they didn't talk about the menopause or that the menopause just didn't happen to women. And so to be able to have kind of those, just thought it was a really beautiful kind of way to expand the world, like you say, but
And
also,
especially in Regency romances, romances in general prioritize people in their 20s, almost exclusively. So I'm hoping that them kind of putting in those segments and Queen Charlotte means that they are building up to something to maybe her having her own romance. I feel
yeah,
like that would be a really missed opportunity to have
yeah,
her kind of well, lamenting about the fact that she's alone and she, misses her husband and would like to find love again type thing. And so I hope that they use that as an opportunity of like, let's give her a love story now, possibly. So yeah.
yeah. What were your highs then of 2023? So I talked about mine with Queen Charlotte. The other show that I actually really loved, I'm not going to talk about it now because I want to move on to hear about you, but the other show that I really, really loved was The Law According to Lydia Poet, which is the Italian period drama about the real historical character, Lydia Poet, who was Italy's first female lawyer. And she actually got her qualification, but then was not allowed to practice. She was kind of debarred a lot of the time because it wasn't legal for women to practice law. And the actor in it, Matilda De Angelis, I just thought that she was absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to mention that here because I don't want to waffle on for too long, but I just thought that was one of my real highs. And I believe that there is another season in the work, although nothing has yet been announced. So have you seen that,
I have
Kayla?
not seen that, but I am excited that there's so many more international period dramas that are coming out. And while I think people who are English speaking should just be okay with, reading subtitles personally, Netflix is putting in a lot of time and effort to dub over the voices and make it a bit
Mm,
more natural. So I think it's becoming much more accessible for people of all different languages to watch things in their own language. But there's so much more buzz around different productions that aren't just in English, especially with period dramas, with things like that. And then the other one was I think it's the Empress or Sissy, the about the princess. I can't remember. Well, her name is Sissy,
yeah,
but that came out as well, and that's gotten kind of international praise. And so I think that more and more we're going to see other period dramas that aren't strictly in English that are becoming
yeah.
popular around the world. And so that's a good example of that.
Tell me, what were your highs of 2022? We talked about Queen Charlotte a little bit, but is there anything else that you particularly watched that you
So
loved this year?
yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that I thought it came out in 2023, but I feel like COVID just has messed with all of our brains. I became obsessed with the show The English, which I think came out late 2022, but I feel like not a lot of people have heard about it. It had Emily Blunt in it and a couple of different actors that I can't think of at the minute, but it was about a woman who is English in the late 1800s going out west to avenge the death of her son. And there's a lot of different challenges along the way. And the show was just so beautifully done. I feel like there's only so many period dramas in your life that kind of changes you as a person, or once you're done with it, you don't know what to do with yourself. And The English was that for me. I think I wasn't expecting, there's a huge plot twist that I wasn't expecting at all. And I feel like we do get used to these formulas with period dramas, especially with romances of how things are going to go and the motivations behind different characters. And that is not this at all. There's a lot of surprises and twists along the way, but the acting is superb, and it just felt like a different portrayal of Native Americans than I've seen before. One that's not so, I don't know, simplistic, I think. I think it was
Mm.
really well rounded. And so I think everyone should check out the English. It just was absolutely heart-wrenching, but worth the watch. I think when people, talk about old classic films like, oh, how old were you when you watched this for the first time and how did it make you feel? The English is one of those. I don't know how to explain it, but this show should have been way bigger than it was. So I highly,
Yeah.
highly recommend it.
Well, I have not seen that, and but it does sound really, really good. It sounds ace, so I'm definitely gonna watch that. I'm gonna put that on my to be watched pile. And I think there's probably people who are probably gonna watch this video who are like, I've never heard of that either. And Emily Blunt's huge, isn't she?
I
Huge, huge
know, I
star.
know. So
And it's
prepare yourself though, like be
yeah.
prepared.
So I think as we've talked about our highs, it's only fair that we go on and have a very brief mention of our lows. We don't want to be too negative, but I think it's only fair. If you're going to talk about the really great things that happened, you could talk about the not so great period dramas. I don't think anyone watching this video is going to be surprised to hear what my low of 2023 was. Sanditon season 3. Which I feel like I've just put a massive target on my back by saying that, because there's a lot of people who've got an awful lot of love for Sanditon. And I do. I loved season 1. I feel like season 1 is like A tier, top tier period drama, absolutely brilliant. And then season 2, I was a bit like, mm, mm,
Do you want to know what an unpopular opinion is for me? So I loved Sanditon all the way through. However, the first season of Sanditon had more budget, and it was written, I think, in its entirety by Andrew Davies, who wrote, the 1995 Pride and Prejudice, and I think he wrote Bridget Jones, and like he's a big writer in the period drama world, and so I think you can kind of tell a difference, to be honest, in the other
mm,
two seasons. My unpopular opinion about Sanditon is that if they've just gone with it being a miniseries like every other Austen um, book has done, where they've been like, oh, well, it's Pride and Prejudice, and what happens at the end? They get married. There's a love confession, and they get married, and there's not multiple seasons of Sense and Sensibility. It's a miniseries, and so if they'd have treated
yeah,
that like every other, um, you know, Jane Austen period drama, then that last episode they just would have gotten together, and I think it would have been a beautiful mini series that people would watch over and over again, and they wouldn't have had to make the other seasons.
yeah.
So that's kind of my hot take on that one.
It's funny, isn't it? Because Sanditon's obviously the unfinished novel that Jane Austen was writing when she died. But I don't feel like, I mean, she was 5 novels down by this point. Was she really going to change her formula? I
No.
don't think she was. I think she was obviously going to get with, what's his name? The main character that she was
Sydney
supposed to marry.
Parker.
Sydney Parker, yeah.
Yeah.
I think she was going to get with him at the end of that novel. They were
Yeah.
going to get married. Like, maybe a little bit more strife and this, that, and the other before the end. But I do think we were going to get Sydney Parker and Charlotte at the end. She was
Oh,
going to be Charlotte
absolutely.
Parker.
And they were going to deliver that on season 2 until season 1 came out and it was so badly received in the UK. And then by the time the US saw it and the US loved it and wanted further seasons, then Theo James was booked up and couldn't do further seasons. So I think they had always intended for them to be together, but I don't know why you would, in my opinion, I don't know why you would draw out a Jane Austen book like that and give it more than
Mm,
one season. I think one season should have been enough, and they should have been together at the end. And but that to
mm.
being said, like them taking that and then creating new storylines in season 2 and season 3 was really fun. I'm not against it, and I loved watching both seasons, but I definitely think they could have saved themselves a lot of heartache if they would have just finished it at the end where they were together.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because there is a whole video about my disappointments with Sanditon season 3. I do, I'm not going against the individual writers. I don't blame the actors. I think all the actors in the show were great. But there's a few individual things that I didn't like about it that I just thought could have been done a lot better. So that's my own personal low. If you want to know more, people who are watching, then please do go and look at that video. I'll link it in an iCard above, and you can go and watch that in its fullness. Kayla, what about you? What was your low period drama for 2023?
Oh goodness. So it's not really a low, but it's one that I kind of have flip-flopped on. So the Buccaneers for me, the Buccaneers came out I think November, so late last year, and it just finished up in December. And the Buccaneers was another unfinished novel by Edith Wharton, and it was about a group of American young women who go to the UK during the Gilded Age in order to find English husbands. They're all kind of upper class women in the US who are looking for a title, and the men are looking for money. So I think the premise is really fun, and it makes sense for a remake. I think the older version is from like 1991. A lot of people have love for that version. I've seen it and enjoyed it. It was okay. But I wasn't against there being a remake, but I think as far as I know, there was a lot of liberties taken with this Buccaneers. I've not personally read the book, but I've watched the old series, and so I'm not going to comment on like how much of it that they've steered away from the original version. But I think because that book wasn't finished, they have a lot of license to do with it what they want. And watching it for the first time, the main character of the Buccaneers is these women being American. That is the main plot point. That is the main character. Is if you played a drinking game of how many times can you drink when they say we're American, we're different, we're cool, like, or there was kind of this obsession with them being American, and because
Mm.
of that, it was kind of like Little Women on steroids in terms of their like, and in terms of one of the beautiful things about Little Women is it's this group of sisters that have this great bond, and it's really wholesome. But they don't have to always be so upstanding citizens. There's all these different
Yeah,
mishaps that happen to the March sisters that kind of humanize them and just make them young girls who love to dress up and have fun and, put gum in each other's, that's type of thing. And I feel like the Buccaneers was trying to adapt to that and be like, oh, we want this to be kind of like Little Women, where these girls are boisterous and they're fun and they run around and they, are emotional with each other, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it was to such a degree that the Buccaneers was really emotional. There was about 20 different love confessions just over and over and over again. And I like him. No, I like him. No, but what if I like him? And for me, it was just a bit dramatic, and the writing was really over the top. And the storytelling was really over the top. And then I was recommended a clip on TikTok from 17 magazine where they were
nice.
interviewing the whole cast. And my brain immediately flipped, and I went, oh, this show is meant to be a teen show, because it is about all these kind of younger girls going over and, meeting boys for the first time, and, getting unfortunately at that time getting married at a really young age compared to the average age of when people get married today. And so in my mind, I wasn't thinking this is a teen show because all of these girls are going over there with the intent to get married. So you don't kind of view it that way. But it would have made so much more sense had they have marketed it like a teenage show.
Yeah,
If they'd have been like, hey, this is kind of like a Dawson's Creek type thing. It will
that's
have a
really
second season. So if they bring out that second
interesting.
season, and yeah, I will see it through a different lens, I think.
It's really interesting what you were saying about like um period dramas that are made for younger audiences. I think that's such a gap in the market. Like you say, a lot of period dramas. I don't know any 15, 16-year-old
Mhm.
really who's going to be interested in something like The Gilded Age, or, more kind of serious period dramas. I'm thinking of things like, the was it The English Game or something like that? It's a period
Yeah,
drama that was made about rugby,
yeah.
or was it football? But yeah, things like that are just not going to interest them. But there's such a great opportunity to create something niche and that's slightly different like that. So I think I'm going to have to edit Tom out of the background of that. Yeah, so I think that's a really, really interesting way to kind of experiment with period dramas and that kind of thing. interesting that you had like you started off thinking it was a bit of a low, but then in the end kind of came around to a different format in the end.
Yeah, and I think too, I made a TikTok on this, but I feel like there are some period dramas that are coming out now that the music that they're using and kind of the tones and things, they're really wanting to ride on that wave of Bridgerton, which is, when the trailer came out and stuff, I was like, "Oh, this is a cool thing to watch in between Bridgerton," which is, what I know their intention was. But it feels like if we're looking back at some of these 10, 15 years from now, and there's a group of them that all have kind of similar things because, it was at the time of the Bridgerton effect or whatever. I feel like we're going to end up grouping these period dramas in the same category because they were all made because Bridgerton had a hype to it at the time and not necessarily
Mm,
because it was a classic all on their own. So I feel like with this one, had they have just been like, hey, we're trying to market this to teens, and yeah, there's going to be Bridgerton people that are going to be interested and going to watch, then I think that I would have been more forgiving about it. But it really did feel like at the beginning watching this, I'm like, well, they're just trying to not copy Bridgerton because it's a different time period and stuff, but like they're trying to use kind of these same sort of dramatic elements that Bridgerton has in order to make this show, and it maybe could be outdated in
mm.
10 years in the same way that maybe Sanditon, not Sanditon, maybe Persuasion could be as well, with kind of what they were trying to do with
Yeah.
Persuasion. So
I think that's really interesting that you mentioned persuasion. That kind of comes on to the next thing that I want us to kind of have a little chat about, really, is this new wave that we've been seeing of kind of edgy, out of the box period dramas and almost like experimentation with story, with production. We've seen some like really great examples of that happening, like with Bridgerton. We've also seen some horrendous examples, like with Persuasion. I know a lot of people on my channel actually, or who watched our Persuasion video, actually liked Persuasion. I think that's the beauty of period dramas all
yeah,
and TV in general. What some people love, other people don't. But I think generally, I think most people agree that what Persuasion tried to do in terms of being edgy and a little bit different, it didn't really kind of work. What do you think about this kind of new wave of productions really in the period drama?
yeah, I think it's a case of they've been popular in the past, so why wouldn't they now? And if we do it edgy, turn it into a comedy like they tried to do with Persuasion, then loads of people will watch it. And I feel like unfortunately this has come at the same wave where companies like Disney are doing remake after remake, or these live action films that don't do well over and over again. Because that's also happening with period dramas, it's all lumped in together where people are going, where are the original ideas? Why isn't there something new out there? Which is why I think Bridgerton is such a fresh breath of air, because it's something new, it's something innovative. I was saying to my husband Jordan the other day, one of the things that's so interesting about Bridgerton is the setup of the seasons that you do not see in any other television show. It's about,
Mm,
two main characters falling in love and getting together, and each season follows a different couple. And then it allows these actors to kind of come in and out of the universe. And so once they're done with their season, they can go and do other work. And then if they want to come back occasionally in future seasons, they can. But it's about these two main couples. So you could have Bridgerton running 4 or 5 years from now, and people will still be interested because it's not kind of like Downton Abbey where there's 15 seasons and half the cast have died, and
yeah.
there's going to be some people that have dropped away from watching it because there's a lot of storylines that have either repeated, or actors have come in and out and stuff like that. Whereas Bridgerton is not that way. It's kind of this new formula almost of how you could do a long-standing show. But it feels like a lot of these production companies, they want to make the same period dramas from, no shade to Dickens, but they want to make the same. Because Great Expectations is one that came out in 2023. Nobody watched it. I don't know who watched it.
Yeah.
I watched the first two episodes, and they had some big names in there. It had Olivia Colman in there, and I did not understand the purpose of why it was made. There was nothing special about it. There wasn't anything that I was like, "Whoa, this is like, hope this goes to the Emmys." But I think that the more that these studios are willing to experiment and try new things, goodness knows they do have the money for it.
Yeah.
I think that that's better than always riding on the coattails of these adaptations over and over again.
No, I think everything that you just said there is absolutely true. And I hadn't really thought about the kind of Disney angle, really, and the kind of Disney experience. It's very similar, like you say, there's so much love for the original animated ones. I feel like Disney can't win either way. If
I
they
know.
do like a modern adaptation, a modern kind of live action version of the traditional animated classic, then people shout at them for being like, why can't you do something that is an exact true to
Yep.
the thing adaptation? And then when they do a very static, very kind of almost carbon copy of that, then people go, oh, this is boring, or it's just not great, and people just don't love it. So I liked that kind of angle of actually proving that sometimes just remaking something exactly as it is doesn't necessarily work. And we are going to come on to talk about why the same period dramas keep being remade in a second. But I just want to go back to another point that you were making about Bridgerton in terms of the way that it is each season is a new couple. I think that's a really, really great point about the show, which I hadn't really thought about before, is the fact that everybody has their expectations managed. I mean, maybe you didn't realize it in the first season, because obviously it was the first season. We didn't know what the second season was going to look like. By the time the second season came around, you were like, oh, okay. So Daphne and the Duke aren't going to be in it, really, apart from the odd cameo. And we're going to go on to a completely new couple. And at first, I was a bit like, this is different. I'm not sure if I like this. But I think having thought about it, I think it's a really great way to keep it fresh. If you know that every time it's going to be a new couple, then you get your head around it. And like you say, there's so much potential there to keep the show going for a really long time without it getting boring. The thing with shows like, I think about something like Grey's Anatomy, which is not a period drama, but it is a Shonda Rhimes production. When Meredith Grey left, sorry, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched Grey's Anatomy,
I mean, I
when
feel like now after like 50 seasons,
yeah, exactly. Like they're into like season 21 or something now. By the time they say, oh, Meredith Grey is going to lead the show, it's like, what? But she is Grey's Anatomy. And it's like, that's the problem. You get these
yeah,
characters that become so entrenched in a show. And I really like the kind of brand new out of the box concept of this is going to be a world, but actually within the world, we are going to explore different stories in every different season. And those background characters that in one season they maybe have half an hour's worth of appearance. In another season, they will be the stars of that season. There's people like Eloise, who I just absolutely adore.
no.
She is my favorite character ever. I can't wait for her season to come around. But in the meantime, I'm quite happy to watch seasons of everybody else. Like, I'm so ready for Colin and
I
Penelope's season.
know.
I'm so excited to see this, even though because is it supposed to? No, it's supposed to be Benedict next, isn't it? If
Yeah.
you go alphabetically, but I suppose we start with Daphne with D.
But
So
they're suggesting that maybe his story, the beginnings of it will be in this third season. There'll be kind of a
yeah,
setup to that. So, and I think that's also the beauty of it is being able to do that. You can kind of weave small aspects of the ones coming up or the ones that have come before in this season, but it can also stand alone if you really need it to. And so that's, I think that's why something like Bridgerton can be more long-standing because they've done that. Because the way a lot of people don't understand, and I don't completely understand how, the acting world works and when people get booked up, and then if there is 2 or 3 years between a show, they can't sign right back on. And then that changes the trajectory of the entire, I mean, Downton Abbey, the entire like trajectory of that show changed because Dan Stevens wanted to go do Beauty and the Beast and he couldn't take off time for Downton Abbey. So they had to change the whole show because of that. Whereas Bridgerton doesn't need to do that. Um,
no,
and so there are ways that they can either bring these actors in just for a couple days of shooting, or bring in other characters that doesn't hinder the main plot of each season. And
yeah,
I think that's just it's a brilliant way to keep a show going for a long period of time in the same way that like maybe Perot went for 20 years or something because he wasn't doing a full television show. He was doing specials, here and there,
Mm.
once or twice a year. And so to me, if you're wanting a show to be high production value and last a long time and have these really strong storylines, you need to be okay with like, oh, the Duke's not returning this season. Well, no, because this is not about the Duke. And I think people who read like Regency romances, like for me, because I had read other Julia Quinn stuff, I had read The Duke and I before I watched Bridgerton. I was well aware that that's the formula of what was going to happen season by season.
Mm.
So when people were talking about Bridgerton as if it was a normal show that had an ensemble cast, I was like, what this is. You have to get on
Yeah.
board. So
Don't get attached to these
no,
characters. You're not going to see them
no.
again. Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think, like I said, I think that kind of different approach, I think, is what people really loved. And I think coming on next to talking about the fact that the same period dramas keep being remade, but they're not doing as well. And I think that's
yeah.
a sign that people want to see something different. Having been said, you can do it really poorly. Like I said, Persuasion was not very well received because of the fact that they didn't do it well. But that goes hand in hand with the traditional period dramas that are being remade that are also not being very well received. We talked about, there's what was the remake that you mentioned earlier?
Oh, Great Expectations.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
because there was a Great Expectations came out a few years ago, wasn't there? That, I mean, I can't remember anybody that was
No,
in it. I did
I
watch
mean,
it,
that
but I
was the
was a
thing.
bit like,
It wasn't
okay.
necessarily necessary then.
I feel like there's been a lot of Great Expectations adaptations, and it's like, why is that the one? Why is that the one that they keep coming back to over and over again?
Well, I did want to go very quickly into this when we're talking about these adaptations and why they keep being made and why they're going to fail. I think I know the future of how that doesn't have to happen, but you can still keep in line with wanting to make stuff adjacent to these, and that is,
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard of The Artful Dodger.
Yes, yeah, from
So
Oliver. Yeah,
yeah. So The Artful Dodger is on Disney Plus. It reimagines the Artful Dodger moving to Australia and becoming a surgeon, and then being kind of a pickpocketer on the side,
I
and
love that
as an
idea.
adult. And I love this show so much. I'm 4 episodes in, and there is a really good love story in it. He's got a love
Amazing.
interest, and I was like, this is what Disney Plus and other production companies should be doing with these classics. I don't think they need to be remade over and over again, but if you want to give me a side character, if you want to tell me, what happened to one of the unmarried Bennett sisters and give them their own like TV series,
Yes.
I would eat it up. And if you do it in a unique way, like The Artful Dodger, you can take so much license with it and still reference the main
Original.
source.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. I mean, I've just done a video about Manacled, which is the Senley New Harry Potter fan fiction, and it's exactly the same. It's like there are these worlds that have been created by authors, and the super fans of those different worlds, so the Austins or the Potter worlds or whatever, they have a desire to know more about the worlds. They have a desire to explore those characters more because they love them so much, and you can only go back and read the original material so much. And so to be able for production companies to expand those worlds without giving us the same thing, like we don't need another Oliver adaptation. We
No.
don't need to see Oliver again. The Oliver of like the early 90s or the late 80s, the little blonde boy, I can't remember what his name is, but he was in an Oliver. He was great. He was the only Oliver we needed. But an Artful Dodger remake where he goes to Australia, that just sounds ace.
It's
And it gets
so
me
good.
excited about it. I don't want to watch another Great
No.
Expectations, which has put loads of money into something that actually I'm like, I don't really care about this that much. And it's funny, isn't it? Because they've done it with a few different things recently. So Lady Chatterley's Lover was another one that they've done another adaptation. And I don't feel so. There was an adaptation that came out in 2023. I did actually enjoy that. I watched it. I enjoyed it. It was okay.
I think it was well done.
But it wasn't that long after another one,
Yeah, there
was
was
it?
one with Holiday Granger
Mm,
probably 5 years ago.
yeah.
So with what's the guy from Game of Thrones? It was her. It was Holiday Granger and the guy from Game of Thrones. So
I mean, there's a
anywho,
lot of
yes.
guys in Game of Thrones. I can't think.
One of the Stark brothers. I can't remember.
Was it
Not
not Jon Snow?
the
Not Jon
other
Snow's
one.
character. The other
The
one.
other.
Yeah, the King in the North.
The other one. So the one that died.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Again, that doesn't help with Game of Thrones. A lot of people die in Game of Thrones as well. But yeah, like literally why do we need two adaptations of the same novel in 5 years? You know,
I mean,
it's the
that one is
same.
specifically because they're like, oh, you know what sells? Sex. So I I
Well,
think
yeah. I
that one
mean,
is I think they think that that is a no-brainer if they just keep making that over and over again, people will watch it, but
but be
um
a bit edgier about it.
and
Why can't we have a modern day Lady Chatterley's
oh,
lover? Why can't Lady Chatterley be mid-40s and have her as a lady in later life having this wonderful re-emergence of her own sexuality in her 40s and have that be a play on? I know it's not necessarily keeping it strictly to the book, but it would enable them as a production to have conversations about older woman's sexuality, about the menopause, about relationships, and the reblooming of your femininity in later life. Like that would be so exciting and interesting.
just some
And
sort of a twist that
mm,
makes people excited for it to go, oh, it's based off of this. It's
yes, I mean it's the same with things like Jane Eyre. I mean, goodness me, if we get another Jane Eyre adaptation soon, I'm gonna kick off. But then the Emily production from 2022
mm.
with Emma Mackey or Mackay. I can never know how you
Okay,
pronounce her
yeah, yeah,
name.
yeah.
That I thought that was really great. I mean, it wasn't historically accurate because, as we know, that Emily Bronte didn't have any kind of romance, but they kind of brought in elements of Wuthering Heights. They kind of meshed, and it was always supposed to be like that. It was supposed to be if Wuthering Heights storyline and Emily Bronte's lives actually were kind of interweaved.
Mm,
And I just thought it was really beautiful. There were elements of that were done so beautifully. And telling Emily Bronte's story, as opposed to it always focusing on Charlotte Bronte,
Charlotte, yeah.
but I would really love if, and I don't think they're going to do it, but if they then did an Anne, they did Emily, then
Mm,
do Anne, and then maybe do Charlotte last, because I like trilogies, I like things being complete. So I would want a Charlotte as well.
yeah.
But something like that, like again, coming back to that thing, it's talking about the fringe stories, isn't it? It's
Mm.
doing something a bit different that broadens the Bronte world rather than just giving us the same adaptation of Jane Eyre again, you know?
And people are doing it in books over and over again. And so
Yes.
I don't know why if they've done research and thought that there wouldn't be kind of an audience for it, but in the book world, like people are reading fan fiction all over the place,
Yeah.
and because you don't have to worry about copyright in the same way you would with say the Harry Potter world, I don't know why they're not just jumping on this and either adapting books, variation books, or making their own. I think there was a big one, The Other Bennett Sister, which is the story of Mary Bennett. And I loved that. It was so well
Mm.
done. And I remember talking about that, or people talking about that book a lot when it came out. And I was like, this would be great if they actually adapted this into either a film or a series.
It reminded me very much of the book The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory,
Mm.
which is the hugely successful novel about Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister. It was one of my favourite books. I actually did my undergraduate dissertation on The Other Boleyn Girl and
Oh,
kind of
cool.
stories about women's narratives that weren't known, and how modern day novelists are kind of rewriting women's history through historical fiction. And that's just, I literally created my undergraduate dissertation about it because I loved the book so much. And I was like, I could do this at university, so I will do. But one of the things that really is a huge bugbear of mine is that I think we had 3 or 4 adaptations of The Other Boleyn Girl. We've definitely had 3 that I can think of.
Mm.
Obviously, the biggest one was the one with Natalie Portman
Yeah.
and, oh gosh, I can't remember her name. I can't remember the name of the actress who
Scarlett
plays
Johansson.
Scarlett Johansson, yeah. And one of my biggest bugbears is that they always make it about Anne Boleyn.
Yeah.
They don't actually follow the narrative of the book. They start
Yeah.
out that way and they tell Mary's story and how the king kind of seduces her and this, that, and the other. And then as soon as Anne comes back from France, then it just becomes about Anne Boleyn and the king and how Anne Boleyn eventually gets beheaded at the end. And it's like, that's supposed to be a subplot. The whole book, the whole narrative is supposed to be about Mary Boleyn. And that's so much more interesting,
Mm.
especially when she kind of runs off to marry her commoner second husband and ends up, just there's a beautiful scene in that book where she ends up like in just a farm, like she literally runs away to go and be at his farmhouse. Can't remember his name now. It's been many years since I've read the book. And she runs away to be with him. And when she arrives, she's got fleas because she's been kind of sleeping in the
I remember
roadside
that. Yeah,
inns
yeah.
to get to his farmhouse. And he's like, oh, you've got flea bites all over you. And she's like, oh, I'll throw away this expensive gown. I don't need it now. And she changes into like just a farmhouse. And she's talking about churning butter. She's collecting eggs and this, that, and the other. And yet that side of that novel has never been told. And it's like, there are so many opportunities for that. But every single remake that's been done of that book has just gone, oh, well, Anne Boleyn sells better. So we'll
Well, and
just go
that's,
for that instead.
that's the whole Tudors, really. It's we could
Mm,
go into an entire discussion on how
yeah.
the Tudors in general is like what people want to talk about history wise. It's, what all the magazines produce and the documentaries that they put out. It's the same storylines over and over. And not that it's not interesting, it's totally interesting. I've been enthralled with it before too. But I feel like there has got to be some other historical characters that we can make movies and documentaries and books
Yeah.
about. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Which I think probably brings us on to the last thing that we're going to talk about, which is shows that are coming up in 2024 that we're excited for. And the reason why I'm moving this on is because people who have watched a few videos on my channel now know how unbelievably excited I am for the Disney Plus adaptation of Shardlake to come out.
Yes, you got me
Which,
into Shardlake.
yeah, I feel like I get a lot of people into Shardlake because they are my
Oh,
favourite series of novels. They're just
I
wonderful.
love I love them. I'm still listening to them. So yes, thank you for getting me into that because now I am equally as excited about
Yeah,
this new series coming out. So, and I think it's such
yeah,
a unique way to do like what we're talking about with,
yeah. The
the
Tudor
Tudors.
period. Yeah,
It's such a unique way of being able to do it through a side character, through some, to be able to
exactly.
weave in what was happening politically and socially in
Yes.
Tudor Britain, but not have it be about, the Tudors.
Henry VIII. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Henry VIII, he's there, he's in the
Mm.
background, but apart from like a couple of very small moments in the books, he's not in them really as a storyline. He's just this kind of looming royal presence in the background. And even when you've got people like, Thomas Cromwell, not Oliver Cromwell, there's Thomas Cromwell, and there's who else is the other person, the main. He's got these kind of huge, big historical characters. Even people like Richard Rich, who is one of the lawyers that he is a real historical character. But like you say, it's bringing a completely different perspective to the period. And I am so excited for a period drama. Don't get me wrong, I love a romance period drama. I love Bridgerton. But I am so excited for a period drama that has got absolutely nothing to do with romance.
Agreed. Agreed.
Like,
I'm a huge crime person. So I loved Cadvile. I am like huge on Cadvile. So when I found out that there was going to be something that was made where there's another kind of medieval or Middle Ages show that was going to be crime related, I was like, oh, this is right down my street.
yeah, yeah. I just think it's amazing. I am so excited for it, but I'm very nervous because it's Disney that are making it.
Disney, I
Now,
know.
Disney makes some wonderful stuff, but they also make some not wonderful stuff.
Well,
And
I
so
say
I'm very
watch
nervous.
The Artful Dodger and see what you think. Because like
Yes.
not that I think that that's. I know that Disney's done some other period dramas, but I feel like that's the first period drama that I have seen of Disney's that's made any sort of impression on me. So watch that and see what you think. And
Mm.
um,
Yeah, maybe I
I don't
will.
know.
Yeah. I know that we're both going to be extremely excited for Bridgerton.
Yes.
Is that your kind of most highly anticipated one for 2024, or is there
Um,
something else that you're waiting for?
yes. I mean, obviously, it's been what 2-3 years since the last season. I think it's getting hard to wait between seasons when we're not used to that. I mean, when at the height of Downton Abbey, those seasons were coming out like clockwork. And
Mm.
so I know that obviously COVID and then the strikes affect those sorts of things, but I think it's becoming more common for period dramas like Bridgerton and the Gilded Age to wait several years. And then what was the other one? House of Dragons has waited that long as
Mm.
well.
But I don't know about you. I would rather probably a bit of a controversial idea. I would much rather wait an extra year and get a really good, well-made, thought out, good production than
Yeah.
have something rushed and be like, you should have just taken longer and done this
Absolutely.
better.
That's definitely the case. I know that they had Bridgerton specifically, I know that they had filmed way long time ago.
Mm,
So I think it's just been a case of I was looking actually at a couple different articles that I was looking at 2023, period dramas that were coming out. There was several magazines that had Bridgerton season 3 coming out at 2023, like articles, old
wow.
articles.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they were planning on it and something happened. I don't really know. But no, I am with you on that. I would rather something be of really good production value and be the best that they can make it, because you can tell there's such a difference between a show that takes its time and that people are raving about, and a show that has been pushed out and kind of they're like, okay, we've got to get this out type thing,
Yeah.
and then everybody's complaining about it, and then people complain about it for years. So you might as
Yeah.
well get it right the first
You might
time.
as well get it right. Yeah. Aside from that, is there anything else that you're looking forward to for this year?
Oh, yes. So there is a show on Jane Austen's life that's coming out called Miss Austen with Keely Hawes. And she was in several period dramas, I think, back in the 90s, like Wives and Daughters and Under the Greenwood Tree. And she's been in like The Bodyguard and stuff. And she's married to Matthew McFadden. So I'm waiting for them to be like a period drama power couple. When is that going to happen? But, anyways. So she plays Cassandra, Jane Austen's sister in this, and it's about Jane Austen's like later life in her 40s, I think, before she dies, and maybe how her relationship with her sister Cassandra and how they deal with her death, I think. So this should be really
Amazing.
good. I'm excited. I'm not sure in the US they've announced it I'm not sure in the UK they've announced it in the US on PBS. But I'm not sure. We'll have to see where it comes out in the UK. And
But another
then
really great way of doing something slightly different around the Austen world.
yes,
Really
yes.
great. That sounds fab.
Yeah, and it seems more realistic than what was that one with Anne Hathaway?
Becoming Jane.
Becoming Jane. Yeah, the just we have there's not a trailer yet, but the stills alone
Yeah.
reassure me that this is not going to be, that kind of level
Yeah.
of 2000s rom-com. So,
Yeah.
not that I enjoyed that for what it
I
was,
mean,
but
Becoming Jane is trash, but I love it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's great. It's the same as that Lost in Austen one
Yes.
where that
I
woman
love
time
Lost in
traveled and
Austin.
then what was it? He ended up back in London and all this kind of stuff,
Oh,
you know.
I
But
love it. It's so bad, but yeah.
speaking of PBS things that are coming out next year, I'm actually this year, sorry. I keep forgetting we're actually in 2024 now. One thing is coming out is something called Mrs. Churchill. Now, I think this is a film versus a series, but it's looking at the life of Clementine Churchill. And I'm so excited for this. I just think being able to see Churchill's life from the perspective of Clementine Churchill, who was the most amazing person in her own right. You know, she did so much work during the war for the women's, I was going to call it RAF, but that's not right. The YMCA canteens. And, you know, she volunteered a lot of her time. I just think she seems like such an interesting historical character. And
His wife.
yeah, his wife,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just really looking forward to seeing him through the lens of his wife. You know, I think, yeah, that'll be really interesting.
I would love if they did more period dramas that way. Eleanor Roosevelt. I think that would be a really
Yes.
interesting. I think you're right. I would
Yeah.
love to see more series done through the eyes of women who are attached to powerful men and how much these women really helped their careers type thing.
It's amazing how men in power, their wives have kind of been written out of history. And yet
Mm.
you're completely naive if you think that the wife of a powerful man has no influence over him. And no, I mean, look at what just going back to Anne Boleyn, look at how Anne Boleyn influenced like England. Like
Yes.
she changed the face of our country forever through her influence over Henry VIII. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Being able to start bringing these female stories to light in ways that they've been kind of ignored throughout history is really great. And the one other one that I will mention that I'm really kind of, there's two actually that are coming out next year, as well as I'm looking at my notes by the way, as well as Mrs.
Me too.
Churchill. Is there's a film coming out about Nell Gwyn, the mistress of Charles II. And there's another one coming out. So that's just going to be called Nell Gwyn. So if people want to have a look into that, they can do. And then there's another one coming out called Firebrand, which apparently is going to be about the life of Catherine Parr, which is the last of Henry VIII's wives, the one that survived, and about her story. So again, these are like women that are very close to kings, and it's going to be their experiences or their kind of perception of the world and their king, their husband's kind of life, or not husband, mistress, mister. What's the opposite? I've never
I don't
thought about
know. I was
that.
thinking that
You
as
can be a
well. I don't
mistress, but
know.
what's the man? So yeah, those are the other ones that I'm looking forward to seeing come out. But yeah, mostly just waiting on Bridgerton and waiting on Shardlake to come. Is there anything else that you would like to mention about 2024 or?
Oh goodness. There is a new Belgravia coming out. Belgravia was originally another Julian Fellows production that was just one season. It is just a mini series, so this next show is going to be 20 years on from the characters before. And Belgravia was also a book he wrote. I think that was well received. I loved reading the book, so I'm excited about them doing another series. I think the future of period dramas really should be in creating really well done seasons and focusing more on mini series. And then if they do well, then maybe creating these offshoots here and there, or, like
Yeah,
Belgravia, that one season was really well done, this mini series. So they're like, oh, you know what? We'd like to revisit this world, but push it 20 years ahead. And it's
yeah.
not that this show needs season after season after season. It's just that, we're creating this really tight, really well done show.
Reminds me as well of there's something called Yellowstone. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like an
Yes,
American
yes.
production. And they've done Yellowstone, which is set like in the current period. Then there's 1883, which is set in 1883. So it's a different generation of the family. And then they've done 1923, which again is another generation of that. So it's all the same family, but each season or each, yeah, I think it's a season. I don't think it's a film.
Yeah.
Each season is a completely different generation of that same family.
I
And
think it's
that's
so
genius as
clever.
well.
So
Yeah.
clever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right. Well, we have talked a lot. So thank you very much. I think it's been a really interesting chat. I'd
I
love to
have
kind
too.
of do these each year, the beginning of each year, and kind
Oh, that'd
of
be great.
reflect back on what we've watched over the year, see
Yeah.
if our opinions have changed from being like super excited at the beginning of the year and then getting to the end. So yeah, we will probably be back this time next year, all being
Yeah.
well, and we'll do another one. So yeah, thank you very much everybody for watching this video. Thank you, Dr. Kayla Jones, for coming on the YouTube again and talking to me about period dramas. I love doing things like this, and
Me
it's
too.
just nicer to be able to throw out some more like kind of long form content where my followers who really love kind of going into more deep dives about period dramas and history can listen along. So I hope you've all enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much for watching this video, and do remember to go and follow Kayla and her husband Jordan at Regency Rumours. They're on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and all of the links will be in the description below. Okay, right. I will see you all in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Please do consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed, all that lovely stuff. And I will see you in the next one. And yeah, thank you again, Kayla. I'll give you
Thanks
the
for having
opportunity
me
to say
on.
goodbye. Thanks, guys. Bye.